Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's lesson, we're going to look at IELTS Writing Task 1, and we're going to focus specifically on bar charts. I'll guide you step by step on how to analyze a bar chart, organize your ideas, and write a strong Band 9 level report. As you know, bar charts are extremely important in IELTS because they appear very often in the exam. They test your ability to compare data, highlight trends, and describe differences clearly and accurately. And if you know how to handle a bar chart properly, you'll feel much more confident on test day. So let's dive right in and see exactly how to approach a bar chart in IELTS Writing Task 1. As you can see the bar chart here, it is about four categories we have: boys' clothes, girls' clothes, men's clothes, and women's clothes in three separate years: 1985, 1995, and 2005. So when there are different dates, so the bar chart or our graph is mainly about it is trend graph or trend chart because it shows different percentages in different years. And so we are going to talk about increase and decrease here in this chart. So first, let's read the question together. The graph below shows annual average spending on clothes per person in the US in 1985, 1995, and 2005. So as you know, the first step in writing an introduction is to paraphrase the question. And for the second paragraph, as you know, it's about overview paragraph. So in overview paragraph, we write about the main features, the specific features of this graph or of this chart. So let's take a look at the chart again. Let's analyze in our overview paragraph what we can write. So on looking at this chart, we see that women's spending in all 3 years, right, was higher. It was consistently higher in all 3 years. And for women in females category, it shows an increasing trend. You can see that there is an increasing trend here, increasing trend in girls and women's clothes. But for men or for male, it shows a mixed trend. All right, so these are the specific features of this chart. And for writing our first body paragraph and second body paragraph, so we should here categorize data. For our first body paragraph, we can write about 1985 and 1995. And for our second body paragraph, we can write about 2005. The easiest way to analyze this chart is to talk about boys and girls' clothes in the first body paragraph or the second, and men's and women's clothes in the first body paragraph. Or you can also do or categorize data based on female and male. For example, you can write about women and girls in the first body paragraph and men's and boys in the second body paragraph. But I'm going to make it a little bit more complex. I'm going to categorize data based on the dates, 1985 and 1995 in the first body paragraph and 2005 in the second body paragraph. And by doing this, what I'm going to do is to write about all the percentages, all the categories in each paragraph. So I'm going to compare them. So in this way, we can compare data better. All right, when you talk about the dates and you write about all the categories in each paragraph. And also you can talk about the changes much better. As you know, our introduction, as I said, is about paraphrasing the question. So the question says the graph below shows. So we can write the bar chart. Instead of shows, we can write illustrates, all right? Annual average spending. I can say how much yearly money did American males and females spend. So the bar chart illustrates how much yearly money did, instead of annual, I write yearly. Did American males and females spend on clothes in 3 different years. In 3 different years, 1985, 1995, and 2005. That's it. That's a good introduction paragraph. Now, our next paragraph is overview. And as you know, I talked about this. In overview, we write about the main features. And we analyze the main features here, all right? Women's spending is consistently higher in 3 years. And for females, girls, and women, you see that the trend, there is an increasing trend. Whereas for men and boys, for male, let's say, male spending is a kind of mixed trend. So these are the specific features. The overall expenditure on women's clothes was consistently higher in all 3 years. Or you can write like this. Overall, it can be clearly seen. This is the phrase that we mostly use when we want to write about our overview paragraph. It can be clearly seen that the overall expenditure on women's clothes was consistently higher in all 3 years. This is our first main feature. Now, we should talk about the female and male spending. Moreover, the average annual expenditure in the female category showed an increasing trend, whereas in males, the spending showed a mixed trend. That's it. That's it. No data, no percentage here, just the main features of the chart. Now, it's time to start writing our first body paragraph. So in writing our first body paragraph, I'm going to write about 1985 and 1995. It's going to be a little bit challenging for us to write, to analyze data and compare data here. And as you remember, we're going to use some percentages in parentheses, like the previous charts we had and we analyzed, all right? So because it's going to be in 1985, so it's the first date here, so you should always start with the date. All right, so in this case, you show the examiner that I'm going to write about this date, right? In 1985 or this year. In 1985, now let's analyze the data. In 1985, as you can see, the spending on boys and girls were the same, right? It's almost around 80%. And large amounts were spent on men's and women's clothes. Men's was $300, and for women it was $500. All right, so we started writing about this in 1985. Exactly the same amount. So we can write this amount in a parenthesis here. Nearly $80 per person was spent on boys and girls' clothes, whereas, because now I'm going to talk about something which is quite different, so I use whereas. Whereas, substantially, it's a good word here, substantially large amounts were spent on men's, again, the percentage should be written in parentheses here, $300, and women's clothing, $500. That's it. We talked about 1985. Now, what happens in 1995? As you can see in 1995, after a decade, the spending rose in every category, right? So we see that there is an increase in all the categories here. And the highest rise, what's the highest rise? The highest rise is in men's category, right? It's around $150. It rose from $300 in 1985 to $450. So it's almost $150 rise, all right, in men's category. And for women, it was not that much noteworthy, right? Because the increase was minimal. So we can also write about this. But it was, again, it was the highest for women's spending, right? So let's start writing our first body paragraph. Instead of saying in 1995, we can write after a decade. After a decade, comma, the spending on clothes rose in every category. However, the highest rise of $150 was seen in the men's category. Although the expenditure on women's clothes was not as noteworthy as other categories, it was still at the top at about $530 in 1995. Because girls and boys spending is not that much significant, so we can also omit talking about this. You can also talk about this, no difference. But we should not write about all the data here, just the most important ones, right? And it's time to start writing our second body paragraph. It's 2005. So let's first analyze the data here. Again, the most spending was for women. And in female category, we see a moderate, let's say, increase. For example, $30, as you can see, for girls spending, right? So for example, I guess, yeah, it's around $30 in girls' clothing. And also for men, we see that there is decrease, right? There is a fall from $450 to $400. For women, there is an increase, all right? And for boys, it remained steady. So we can write about this. And we can start writing our paragraph with a phrase like after a decade. Or you can also say in 2005, but I guess writing after a decade might sound more, let's say, natural and not repetitive. After a decade, per person spending in the female category saw a moderate, you can write it here in the parenthesis, $30 in girls spending, which was moderate, to significant, again, I'm going to write in parenthesis, as much as $95 in a women's clothing increase. Let's analyze this sentence. After a decade, per person spending in the female category saw a moderate. So when I say saw a moderate, let's say, rise or increase, I can write about the detail of that moderate rise in parentheses, like this, like what I did here. $30 in girls' clothing to significant, as much as $95 in women's clothing increase. However, now I'm going to talk about boys and men's spending. Expenditure on boys' clothes remained steady. So there is no difference, as you can see. So it's steady. So when there is no difference, there is no increase or decrease, we can write remained steady. Boys' clothes remained steady even after 10 years, and on men's clothes, reduced by $50. Yeah, that's it. So as you can see here, we analyze data based on the years instead of categorizing based on, let's say, female or male based on gender, or also based on adults and, let's say, children. All right, so there are different ways to analyze. But for me, the most challenging and complex analysis is categorizing data based on years, because when you categorize that based on years, so in that case, you have to compare data, and that would be a little bit challenging for IELTS candidates. All right, that's all for today, guys. Hope you enjoyed this lesson and has been really helpful to you. Until next time, enjoy your time, stay tuned, and goodbye.